Hey, thanks for watching. I have a few harp stories for you. Now, as a harper, I have cold hands, but a warm harp. In case you're new to the harp, these are the parts. The sound box, the sound board, the shoulder, the harmonic curve, here's the pillar, and this is the tuning key. You need the key to start the harp. Okay, first story. My first harp was a kit. I had hurt my arm and it was in a sling, but I was so excited that when it came that I assembled it anyway with one hand, and it's not something I recommend. And around that time I met other harpers, and we tended to meet outdoors where the sun would melt the glue and the glue would slowly collapse on itself. And when I got home, I'd re-glue it, we'd meet again, and the same thing would happen. So that harp sounded like rubber bands unless I put it on my kitchen table, one of those 1950s tables, you know, with the thin tabletop and the 4 tapered legs, and that made it sound wonderful. I practiced in the kitchen a lot, and finally, I moved up to a non-meltable model. The harp has a unique sound, especially when you play arpeggios and glissandos. This is an arpeggio, and this is a glissando. And this is La Bamba. Here's another story. One year, the college I was teaching at had a Renaissance dinner, and the head of the music department, Walter, and I decided to perform a duet with me on the harp and Walter playing recorder. We worked up half a dozen tunes and borrowed costumes from the theater department. Now, another music professor had put together a quartet, and before each tune, he would introduce the piece in rhyme. Walter turned to me and said, "We should do that." Now, neither of us was comfortable in our costumes, especially the tights, but we gamely got up on the platform and Walter recited a little poem to introduce the first piece. After we played it and during the applause, I noticed Walter had reached up from behind, under his leg, to pull his tights up. Mind you, we were on a platform and his crotch was at eye level with the audience. So I looked at the audience and with a very straight face, I recited, "We'll put this next tune to rights after the recorder player adjusts his tights." You know how the harp is like a fish? They both have scales. Now, here's a story about wedding gigs. The music of the British Isles is brutal. There are so many love songs with beautiful melodies that end with the groom killing his bride, steal her dowry to get her pregnant, or just for the thrill of it. Another harper and I were playing background music at a wedding. We didn't really have a set list. She asked me, "What should we play next?" "How about the Grenadier and the Lady?" I said. "Well, we can't play that," she said. "He won't marry her because he goes back to his wife after the war." "Okay, well, what about False Sir John?" "We can't play that. He tries to kill her, and then she ends up killing him." "Bridget O'Malley?" "She dumps him." "Cruel Sister?" "Her own sister tries to kill her so she can steal her boyfriend." I think we ended up playing Fanny Power about 5 times. Now, I learned to play the harp in 1980, and I earned my private pilot's license around the same time. My plan was that I could fly and play the harp. I'd have a guaranteed job in the next world. I even wrote a song about it.
I'd learn to fly and play the harp in that celestial sphere. I could have learned just for enjoyment harp and how to fly, but I want guaranteed employment after when I die.
This story is about being careful with your advertising. When I moved to Ithaca, I played with a bouzouki player named John. John got us a gig at a college that he was really happy about until he realized that he had told the promoters it was a harp duet, by which John meant a duet with a harp in it. The next day he was frantic, worried that the flyers, which were already circulating, were misleading people into thinking they'd be seeing 2 harpers. I told him not to worry, that people would be understanding, but there was no consoling him. So I suggested that we try some things like auto harp, where I would damp some strings and he would play. That didn't really sound good, so I tried teaching him something simple on the harp, and that's not as easy as it seems if you've never played the harp before. He just couldn't do it. So I came up with a different idea. Night of the concert came, and we had a great first set. I left my harp on stage during the break, and as the lights came up for the second set, John walked on stage all by himself, holding his penny whistle. He began telling his story to the audience of how he had misspoken, and how we had tried many schemes to give them a real harp duet. So at that moment, I walked on stage with a second harp, placed it next to the first one, and began to play a tune on both. A lot of harpers play by reading music, but I've always played by ear. That's why my lobes have calluses. My final story is about traveling with my harp. This happened many years ago. I made a travel case for my medium-sized harp from plywood, padded with foam on the inside. The shape of it made it clear that it was a harp, and a stencil in stark white on a black case that read, "Please handle my harp, H-A-R-P in big letters, with care." I had to fly to a gig in Washington, D.C., so I checked it as luggage and got on the plane. My window seat happened to be above the conveyor belt that they used to load the luggage. And as I watched, trolley with the bags pulled up, and I saw my harp among the suitcases. And two burly baggage handlers grabbed the first suitcase, and one of them lifted over his head and thwack! Banged it onto the conveyor belt, and up it went. And then thwap! And then a third. Thwap! I nervously watched as they went for my harp, which was next in line. They picked it up, and so gently that they could have been ballet dancers, softly deposited it onto the conveyor belt. Phew! I watched as it rode into the plane. And then they picked up the next suitcase and thwap! So I'll leave you with these words, something that every harper knows. Home is where the harp is.